I've whipped up a quick demo to show how a bottom navigation bar works if we were using setState and creating a list of screens. Let's take a look at the nav screen. Here we have the current index of our bottom navigation bar. We have a list of screens, which has a feed screen, and then 2 more screens. Down here we have a bottom navigation bar with the current index, and then all 3 of the items for our feed, search, and profile. When the user taps on any one of these bottom navigation bar items, the index is passed into the setState, and our current index is set to the index. And then in order to render the correct screen, we set the body of our scaffold to screens, and then grab the correct screen using the index. When I click through these, we can see the text updates accordingly. But there is one problem with this. If I was to navigate to a new screen in any one of these screens, I would expect to still be able to see the bottom navigation bar and click to switch to that screen. However, with this setup, if I was to click a button, and in this case, feed here is a flat button, and then go to a new page, we can see the bottom navigation bar disappears, and so I'm unable to switch screens. In order to go to the search or the profile screen, I'd have to click the back button, and then click search or profile. What we want to do with our Instagram app is allow the user to navigate to a screen and keep the bottom navigation bar showing. So when the user goes to this screen, they would still be able to see the bottom navigation bar, be able to click search or profile, and then when they come back to home, their current state in the navigation stack would be saved and they would see new page. When they click back, they would just go back to the original feed screen. Now implementing this is a little complicated, but the main idea is that for each one of our bottom nav items, we're going to have a unique navigation stack. We're also going to be using a stack widget inside of our nav screen, and we're only going to render the current navigation stack for the current selected item. To do this, we're going to use an offstage widget, which allows us to hide widgets based on a Boolean value. And so the first thing we're going to do is define some Navigator keys to maintain the current Navigator state for each one of our bottom nav items. Above items, let's create another map where we map the bottom nav item to a global key Navigator state. Navigator keys. Let's copy our map down here and paste it. Instead of these icons, we can just replace it with global key and instantiate Navigator state. And now let's hit save. And now if we scroll down here, let's create a method called select bottom nav item. And this is going to take in the context, the selected item, and a Boolean value that checks if the selected item is equal to the currently selected item. Underneath our build method, let's make void select bottom nav item. And I noticed that I added an ed here. First we have our build context, bottom nav item, selected item, and then bool is same item. Let's cut out our update selected item here, and we can put it into our select bottom nav item. And all we want to do in here is check if the item is the same. If the user taps on the currently selected item, then we want to pop them all the way back to the first route in that navigation stack. So let's pretend the user's in the feed screen, and then they view the post's comments. If they were to tap the feed screen icon again, then they would be popped back all the way to the feed screen. This is a common design pattern, and it's really useful if the user has drilled down multiple pages into the navigation stack. This way they can just tap the icon button again, and then all of these screens will be popped away back to the first route. So in here, all we have to do is get the current Navigator key, and we can do that by doing Navigator keys sub selected item .currentState, which is the current state of our navigator state, .pop until the route is first. Next, let's work on the body of our scaffold to render the different screens. Like I said before, we're going to be using a stack widget here. And this is so we can render all the screens to make sure we always save the current navigation state for each one of the screens. Let's take our items and map the item and icon. But since we're not using the icon, we can just set it to an underscore. Map entry, item, and then we want to build offstage navigator, which is a method we're going to write, where we pass in the item, and then check if the item is equal to the current selected item. Build offstage navigator is going to be a widget, so we can just get the values and convert that to a list. Let's scroll down here, and we can make our build offstage navigator. Takes in the bottom nav item, or the current item, and a boolean is selected. We're going to return the offstage widget, and this has a boolean offstage. Let's hover over offstage, and we can see it creates a widget that visually hides a child. And by default, offstage is set to true. In this case, we only want the UI for the selected item rendered, so we can use the bang operator is selected. And this is only going to show the item that is selected, because offstage hides its child when it's true, and it shows the child when it's false. Now the child is going to be a tab navigator, and tab navigator is a widget we're also going to write that takes in the current navigator key, navigator keys, current item, and the item, current item. Let's go into our file tree, and this is going to be a new widget for our nav screen. Tab navigator.dart. Inside of widgets, let's export this. And let's write our tab navigator. This is a stateless widget that takes in final global key, navigator state, navigator key, and then the bottom nav item. Generate the constructor. And here we're going to return a navigator widget. And the navigator widget maintains a stack-based history of child widgets. And so we're going to be making a navigator widget for each one of our bottom nav items. That way we're able to switch between our bottom nav items and not lose the state of each stack. Let's pass in our key, navigator key. Our initial route will be a slash. And since we're going to be using this in multiple places in this file, let's just create a static const string tab navigator root and set that to a slash tab navigator root. In order to display our screens, we're going to have a method here called onGenerateInitialRoutes, and this gives us back a navigator state and a string. We're not going to be using the navigator state, but we will be using the string, which is the initial route. And in here, we need to return a list of routes. This will be a material page route, where the builder context will run the method route builders, where we pass in the initial route and the context. And we'll write route builders in a second, and it will make more sense. The settings for this will be route settings, name, tab navigator root, and down here, map string widget builder, route builders. We'll just return a map with tab navigator root, context, and call a method called getScreen. Now in order to use route builders like this, we can just define route builders equal to route builders and remove the underscore from the variable name. And the final method we need to write inside of our tab navigator is going to be getScreen. And getScreen returns a widget taking in the build context and the bottom nav item. And this is just a simple switch statement where we take the item and then we need a case for each one of the items. So we have feed, search, create, notifications, and profile. For each one of these cases, we're just going to return the corresponding screen. So for this one, we'll have return feed screen. Search will be return search screen. Create is return create post screen. Notifications is return notification screen. And then profile is return profile screen. And now let's make all of these screens. So inside our directory, we're going to be making 5 new folders, one for each one of these screens, and add the files in each of them. So we have feed, which has feed screen.dart, stateless widget, feed screen, a static const string route name is feed, and then the scaffold body with centered text, child text, feed. Now let's copy this. Let's make our search screen. Inside of search, search screen.dart, paste this in, change out feed for search, route name is search, and the text will be search. And I'm going to speed up the video here and add the 3 other files and folders. And now that's all done. We can go into our screens barrel file and export each one of these screens. Feed screen, export search screen, create post screen, notifications, notification screen, and finally our profile screen. And now if we go back into our tab navigator, we can fix these errors by quick fix, importing screens.dart, and removing the extra S in create post. Hit save, let's hot restart, and if we hover over get screen, we can see we're missing a return statement for the default case. So let's add that in, default, return a scaffold. And now we can save. Let's hot restart, and I can click through this, and we can see each one of these screens is working correctly. We can test out our navigation by going into the feed screen. Let's turn feed into a flat button. Child text feed, and the on pressed will create navigator.ofContext.push material page route. Builder, we don't use the context, pass back a scaffold. And we'll add an app bar in with the title text, hello. So if we click the feed, we move to the screen we just defined, and we're still able to move to the search, create post, notifications, and the profile screen. When we go back to our home screen, we can see our navigator stack has saved. So we can click back, and everything works as expected. Let's run through our navigation one more time. The first thing we did was create a bunch of navigator keys, and that way we have a way to reference the navigator key for each one of our bottom nav items. Inside the body of our scaffold, we created a stack widget with a list of offstage navigators. The reason we use a stack widget is so we actually render all of these screens, but because we're using an offstage navigator, we only show the user the screen of the item they have currently selected. Because we pass in isSelected and use the bang operator here on isSelected, offstage is able to hide the UI of all the other screens. And then we render the tab navigator. Tab navigator takes in the unique navigator key and the current item. Here we have our tab navigator root, which is a slash. We create something called route builders, and route builders is just a private method that takes in our tab navigator root and calls getScreen. Our navigator is the widget that allows us to maintain a stack-based history of child widgets, and that's how we're able to save the current state of this feed screen. We pass in our key to our navigator, so we're able to access the key by calling navigator.ofContext, and that gives us back this key. The initial route is tab navigator root, which is the slash here, and then inside onGenerate initial routes, we pass in our tab navigator root, accessing the route builder's tab navigator root, and calling getScreen. GetScreen then takes in the item for this tab navigator, and based on that item, it renders the correct screen. So for feed, we render the feed screen, for search, we render the search screen, and so on. And now we're all done with our bottom navigation bar. Let's take one more look at our feed screen, and here you notice that I did navigator.ofContext.push, and since I plan on using named routes to do this, we're actually going to be adding, inside of our custom router, another method here called onGenerateNestedRoute. And this onGenerateNestedRoute is going to be a different method that we're going to be using inside of our tab navigator, and we would just define that by saying onGenerateRoute, and then passing in custom router dot onGenerateNestedRoute. And since I already wrote this, we might as well just add the skeleton for this method. So once you add this into tab navigator, let's go back to our custom router, and underneath the onGenerateRoute method, we can create static route onGenerateNestedRoute, takes in route settings, and here we can copy this. The print statement will be nested route, where we take settings.name, and then for now we don't have any cases, and we can just leave the error out. So let's save that. And this is going to come in handy for when we want to add in our edit profile screen, our comment screen, and our profile screen, because all of those screens can be accessed from multiple bottom nav items.